Johnny Escalante, Kiki, J&K Present. We'll get into more detail of what we do right here in a bit, but first wanted to thank the organizers for doing this. When we got asked to do a TED Talk, I was kind of like, you sure? Like, you emailed the right people? And they were like, yeah, let's meet. So it's kind of cool to come full circle. We're both from El Paso, and I'm actually from Socorro, born in Socorro, went to Escontrias Elementary, and grew up right around the neighborhood. So yeah, it's crazy how everything comes and turns full circle. So excited to be here. With the TED Talk, we had a lot of conversation on how to start, where to go. We wanted something to obviously resonate with everyone, no matter what profession you're in, no matter what stage of your career you're in. But obviously, we can only speak on the experience that we have and the industry that we're in. But we try to make a presentation that can resonate, hopefully, with everyone. So I'll get started with some of the things that we think we've learned along the way. And Kiki will go into more depth of how we kind of got to those conclusions. So first and foremost, being from a small town, both of us, it's very important that we focus on it. Doesn't matter where you're from. Growing up, there was always a stigma of being from a small town. And that don't want to necessarily admit it, but admittingly so, it dawns on you a little bit. You're not from a big town or whatever, but this is very important for us to kind of get past that, to bridge that gap, to get over it. As things are changing now, it doesn't really matter where you're from. And that goes from the town that you're in, to the school that you go to the job that you intern at or worked at. Growing up in our career, I didn't get into the university or the program that I wanted to get into. I didn't necessarily have the job experience that I thought I needed. And I realized that I didn't need those things. It was very important that I didn't let that weigh me down. And that goes to say to the opposite. Just because you went to the right school, just because you work for the right person, doesn't mean that you're automatically guaranteed success if you go off on your own or go into another position. So this was very important for us to mention that it's up to you to determine that. Secondly, don't be afraid to get started. This is actually my favorite thing, and I always tell this to everyone. The hardest part is also the easiest part, right? It's to get started. It's always like, I don't think I'm smart enough. The biggest one that I hear and that I told myself is, we don't have enough money. We're not cool enough. It's very easy to have these excuses, and that can be in anything, to hold yourself back. I always make the joke that if we were any smart, we would have never started, right? And it sounds kind of cheesy to bring up like a Steve Jobs quote on a TED Talk, but he had this thing that says like, stay foolish. I don't know if everyone's ever heard that. But I think that's very important, right? To be able to be foolish, to look dumb, to not know the answers. Even to this day, I have meetings and I'm scared to ask what that word meant. What does that term mean? Because I feel like I'm gonna look dumb or like not educated enough. But I think if you can stay foolish and not be scared to ask those questions or go figure them out on your own, that's very important. And lucky for us, we were kind of foolish enough to figure it out. Secondly, organized chaos. And that was actually the subject title of our talk. And I know it's kind of like a blatant term. I even have it tattooed on me, which is kind of cheesy. And it's important because organized chaos means, okay, now I get started. Now what? And it's kind of like shit. And I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but now it's like, now what, right? So now it's like you got to figure it out. And so I think, from the traditional, I have a business plan and I'm doing my due diligence and I'm writing things down, it's going to be organized chaos. There's going to be a lot of things happening that we can't prevent or we can't plan for. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. And you hear that all the time, right? Like, nothing goes as planned, you go as you go. And that's where I like the being okay with things being perfectly imperfect, if that makes sense. And just get better on your way and keep pushing. Which brings us to the next thing. Once you keep pushing and you're organized and everything's kind of a mess, then you have to find your path. And I think that's the magic in doing anything that you do. Finding your path is what I feel feels like the most honest and genuine to you. And we've all been there probably with like an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend where it's not right, or there's certain things that you just have to be honest with yourself. And the same applies to business and ourselves, right? As we were figuring things out, we had to figure out what worked for us. We learned as we go, and we knew what was genuine to us. Going back to number one, not having that experience of the college or working for a big company, we didn't have a corporate structure or a way to learn things textbook style. So we had to figure it out on our own and see what works for us. It might not work for anyone else. It might be like breaking away from the norm, but you figure out what works for you, what feels authentic to you, trust your intuition, be honest with yourself, and figure that what works, find your path, and that works. And then brings you to the detour. So you found your path, and now you're like, this is awesome, things are going great, and then you hit the detours and roadblocks. Now at this position in our career, and I still feel like we're, I always tell people we're like rookies and veterans at the same time, right? Because like I don't feel like we've been doing it for a while, but we kind of have. You hit these roadblocks, and now I tell myself, like, if everything's going smooth, I kind of get worried. Now I'm like, okay, there's got to be some sort of friction, some sort of pushback. And the no's, that happen, you have to be okay with them early on and even later into your career. And we'll touch base on that a little later about how these little detours and roadblocks are very easy to, kind of like bump you off your path, cloud your judgment, make you kind of second guess yourself. And I know it sounds cliche to say that, but it's really important to go back to all these things. Remember why you started in the first place. Remember, how you had figured things out in the beginning and how you just keep pushing forward, at your own speed, at your own frequency, and just keep moving. And just to give you a quick story on that detour, our very first business, we did everything. We were opening up our first bar, and we had all the due diligence. And I mean, we were trying to talk to bankers and loans and architects, and we had everything ready. And I'm not kidding, the day that we were supposed to go in and sign the deal, the other team decided to pull away. They said, no, we're not doing this. This has to provide like 6 months of work. And so we were kind of devastated, heartbroken. This isn't right. Something's off. Energies, crystals, God, whatever you want to think of. And we said, this is, so I remember going back and being like, oh man, I'm out. This is not for me. I'm going to choose something else. And that big no was my big first lesson, or our big first lesson, for me to be like, keep pushing. There's something. Our second opportunity that came right after that was like the biggest blessing in disguise. Like now I think back and I'm like, we found a new property that was right by the ballpark. The ballpark hadn't really been announced yet. And now it's been one of our most successful ventures till. And I always look back at things like that when things kind of hit the fan, where I'm like, that was a blessing in disguise. Keep pushing forward. So now every time we have that no, that resistancy, I always say, something good's coming. So after that, I'm going to give it to Keek.
Okay. How's it going? Just wanted to take a moment to also thank you guys for having us. We were deciding on what we wanted to kind of speak about and resonate with you guys. And like Johnny said, these are the kind of points that we came across. And now we're going to get into kind of how we found out what worked for us and how we came up with these points and these lessons that we've learned along the way. Johnny spoke about finding your own path, and you will find your own path as long as you keep moving. And I think for us, it was not really knowing what we were going to get into. I had just graduated from TCU, moved back to El Paso, thinking that I was going to have to move away to do what I was planning on doing, which was not what we ended up doing now at this point. So being from El Paso, linking up with Johnny, he says, we can do these events, and we'll see how we can compare ourselves to these other bigger cities that we're traveling to and whatnot. So we started off small, and then we started to try to book these DJs, and that's kind of how we started making a name for ourselves. But when we were trying to figure out what we needed to do to pull in the crowd, it was very difficult, and that's when we started to notice that being from El Paso, trying to get these acts to come in town, trying to compete with major markets, trying to get agents to pay attention to us, it was difficult. We didn't have the ability to book these acts that just pull people, which was like the Calvin Harrises and stuff like that at that point in time. So we had to really create a following and curate an event that we felt wasn't being held at the point in time. So with that, we started doing these events, creating these experiences that we felt were needed in town, and we were able to do our first Coliseum show by curating these events that we were doing at these club shows. And doing our first Coliseum show, these acts right here, I can't even tell you who this is right here, but that wasn't important. The ability to create a following, create an experience, raise the level of bar of what people were doing. And then we started doing downtown shows, so we started creating really some noise in the city of acts and music that we were needing to come with. So with this said, we were trying to discover what we were going to do with our own We were doing our shows at other people's venues, so we really wanted to create our own venue, even though we knew nothing about the industry. We wanted to do our own bar. I think people thought we were going to do these big, elaborate shows, a venue with concerts, and we decided to do later, which was right by the ballpark. This is actually the first place that we looked at. To us, it was like beautiful. We were like excited. We had this idea of what we wanted to do, and I remember like walking up, showing my dad what we were about to do, and he was like, "Are you sure you want to do this, mijo?" He's like, "You can easily go to the fountains. There's a lot of spots that are empty there." But in our head, we had an idea of what we wanted to do. We had a path, we had a vision. Even though we didn't know anything about the bar business, we were promoters, we were doing shows, we were doing parties. We had created a following, but we didn't let that steer us from trying to do our own spot. We asked all the questions. We surrounded ourselves with people that we could learn from. So we just basically became sponges and learned as much as possible. I remember I brought down one of my best friends from out of town who was an expert in this field, and he was training us. We had him come down and train, and it was just a blessing to try to like learn as much as possible. And even though it wasn't what he was traditionally used to, we made it work for ourselves. So this is me about halfway through, super sad, trying to figure out what's going on, looking defeated, and we slowly started to figure it out. Here's Johnny. We aren't architects. We aren't bar owners yet. We know nothing about liquor sales and inventory, but we decided to put our heads down and figure it out as we went along. This place right here is, like Johnny said, one of our most biggest successes in what we've done, and we're going on 7 years strong this year. So it's something that we just kind of learned as we went along, and it wasn't something that we were really expecting, but in our vision, we kind of understood that it was going to something that was needed in El Paso, and we could figure it out as long as we put our heads down and worked hard enough. After this, we decided that we needed a space because our team grew from 2 to 5 people probably. We had been working out of coffee shops, Village Inn, H&H Car Wash. We were working out of all these places. So we decided we needed an office. We searched high and low for a place, and we came across this beautiful space called 1-1 that ended up being called 1-1. Same thing. We had no idea what was going on with what we were going to do. It was way too big for just us, so we decided to chop it up and do a co-working space. New business venture that we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We knew nothing about real estate at the time. We knew nothing about price per square foot. This was our business plan, literally drawn out on a piece of paper. Not really how a business plan should go. And trying to explain the concepts of a co-working space at that time was something that most people didn't really understand. But not being afraid to try something, a brand new path that we didn't know we were getting ourselves into, ended up something that worked out, and we ended up moving in there and having to move out because people ended up taking up our space, and it's still around as at this moment. So new path that we didn't know that was going to entail, and with everything that we've learned, we started applying that into our new spaces, which ended up being, we did Born and Raised after that. This was another place that we decided to take a house, remodel it. The train was being pitched to us as the train was being pitched to us as it was going to be coming down by Cincinnati, back downtown. So we took the opportunity to create this space, take everything that we've learned up until this point, and at this moment we've kind of created our own organized chaos, which really entails, it may not be working for anybody. We weren't able to like intern anywhere. We weren't a big hospitality group at this point in time, but we felt like we had our formula down. We've learned enough to be able to apply it to what works for us, even though we were still drawing things on paper. This is like my landscaping, architectural landscaping for it, and then this is like once we started figuring out what the layouts were going to be. But in our heads, we we have learned so much from what we've done. We became experts in our own field, in our own way, and we were able to apply it to every business venture that we decided to move on to. So this is us literally still applying it to the way we've learned. And then this is our newest spot, which is Hush Hush, which has been something that we've grown into. And I feel like we became experts without the real training, just hands-on training, just putting in our own work, and really creating our own resume by life experiences, honestly. And that's when we say, like, the direction is more important than your speed, which means, like, we started off in one area and just kind of continued to work, learned as we went along. And it's easy to compare yourself to other people that have been doing it longer than you have, that have more success than you have, or are accepted to the universities that you're trying to get into. But it's important to not surround yourself with how fast you're getting there or what you got going on. It's important to just keep moving, keep learning, surrounding yourself with people that you got to learn from, and with that comes new obstacles, which I'm going to have Johnny speak on real quick, because that's something that the learning never stops. The ability to continue to adapt, and you never know what's going to be heading your way. But as long as you keep moving, I feel like that's something that is much needed in this space. So I'm going to have Johnny talk to you about, like, new experiences and obstacles that we've encountered, and what's next for us.